Welcome, esteemed guests, to the Darkstone Dossiers with your host, Anthony Darkstone.
Buonasera a tutti. Bonsoir, buenas noches, bonne nuit, and a very warm good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, depending on where you are watching on the planet. And I'm sure you've seen it before, but it'd be a good idea just to run it, which is another clip, just giving you a very brief background on my two guests. We have an awful lot to cover today, and afterwards we have a meet and greet after the show, main show that is, where you get an opportunity to put your microphones on and talk directly to my guests and ask them any questions you want. I don't guarantee they're going to answer you, but you can try. If you don't want to do that for whatever reason, just put it up in chat and I will read it out. Let's just get to my first guest, and that is Dr. J. Ungar.
Hi, gang. How are you?
Hey, hello, Jay. How you
Hi,
doing,
Anthony.
sir? How you
I'm
doing?
good.
Right. Well, I tell you what, we've got so much to cover today with you and Scott. I'm going to start by asking you a very simple question. All of us have different stage names, etc. What is and how is and where did it come from? Ragnu the OK.
Ragnu the OK. Well, that's a pretty good starting point. So if you think of Ragnu, you've got Ungar flipped, and instead of the magnificent, kind of like truth in advertising.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Now, I know you're located in the U.S. and
I'm in Portland, Maine. We're actually just kind of like just a stone throw away, called Cape Elizabeth. It's really a pretty area here. It'd be great if we could just somehow figure out a way to eliminate winter, but otherwise it's 3 seasons of the year, not too shabby.
Okay. Now, you've, as most people know here, and we've pulled up on the clip, are a retired medical physician, and you are described, correct me if I'm wrong, an internist who specializes
Internal medicine,
in
internal medicine,
geriatrics.
and
Yeah.
geriatrics.
Okay.
So for
Okay.
about 40 years, I had my own private practice, and it was great because I had a captive captive audience who couldn't leave without my asking them after the medical stuff was done whether they'd like to see something fun. So most often they did. It got to a point where people were saying to me, Doc, I'm feeling pretty good. Let's get to the fun part already.
Well, I'd like to talk to you about that a little bit, because many of us here have friends who are medical professionals, but also magicians in one form or another, either sort of pros or part-time or whatever. Well, not pros perhaps, but part-time. What is your take on being a medical doctor and doing some magic for someone who's in your office at that moment? You've written the prescription, you've told them they're not going to die in the next 24 hours, and like they say, let's get to the fun stuff.
Right.
You then
Well,
reach for some, you reach, how does the mindset of that work for you and patients?
Actually, it's actually a really good point, and it's a little tricky. The thing is that people can't feel as though you're shortchanging them ever, in that you got to make sure that, what they're there for is being addressed. I mean, you don't want to come across as a clown. So my main job is to make sure that they feel better, or at least hopefully get on the road of feeling better. And once we've established that the medical stuff is kind of like is complete from their perspective, that's when I'll say, hey, now that we've got that over with, at least for the moment, we want to see something fun.
Okay.
So it's kind of like it's the sundae, it's the cherry on top of the sundae, if you will.
Okay, that's a very good analogy, in fact. Now, you recently, or relatively recently, I should say, written a couple of books. Now,
Well,
I have to admit that at first I wasn't too happy with your style. I mean, I'll just say that right out front. But then I began to read them again and again, and I went, wow, Anthony, you missed a very important point, because your style of writing, to the best of my knowledge anyway, is completely different to most of the stuff that all of us have read. You have a very kind of conversational approach.
I think I write the way I talk.
Uh-huh.
So it may not always come across great in print, but it is who I am. So
No,
you
that's fair enough. As I say, I then reread them and realized that I'd missed this important point. Well, speaking of that, you have we'll talk about those and you'll show them as in a moment. But before we do, I'd like to just have a couple of quotes. This one, I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it. If Austin pulls me up on the screen, people can actually see me reading it, I guess. Um, it says, "This is a theosaurus, a quirky compilation of pun-filled power and conjuring curiosities. In the future, magical archaeologists will find this tomb and be left shaking their heads." Now, this was from none other than Jeff McBride. Let me get to another one, and I believe the gentleman is in the room. I had the pleasure of meeting him, I think, once or twice and shaking his hand at the SAM conventions, and that is past national president of the Society of American Magicians, Dick Bowman. And he said, or wrote, "The doctor is in, yes, in tune with performing magic for real people. His work is about developing and structuring magic for real people. Jay is not a dinosaur. He makes you think." Now,
thank you, Dick.
there's a lot of quotes that people that I could pull up, but I kind of like both of those
I
because
haven't been paid for that yet, by the way.
it. Well, thank you, Dick. I ask you to keep on mute, sir. You can have your say later in the meet and greet. Now, the reason I brought those up and the reference to Saurus, Theosaurus, and the reference to dinosaurs will become apparent when you hold up a copy, if you would be kind enough to do so, Jay, of your latest book.
Magical thoughts from a dinosaur. I guess I'm the dinosaur.
Okay. Well, how did that, as somebody in the quote said, quirky title come about?
I'm sorry.
I said, as somebody I mentioned in the quote has said, how did that quirky, and I used their adjective, how did that quirky title come about?
I don't know. I guess quirky comes from the fact that I happen to use a lot of puns in when I do my shticks, and I guess I guess I happen to be a little quirky.
Well, that answers that. Now, these books. I mean, hold up the other one, the first one. I think,
Okay.
if you would please. So
This
people can
is
see. Yeah.
this is 20 years ago, um, maybe a little grayer now, maybe a few more pounds and 20 years older, but not too bad for the wear, I guess.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
Need
Now,
magic light.
your books focus on something very interesting that is dear to my heart, and I dare say to several of the people in the room. And that is you place an emphasis not so much on technique, but on presentation.
Not
Care
only
to
presentation, but
wax a little bit lyrical about that?
presentation and connection. Because I really think that magic, if it's going to thrive, really needs to take another step. Instead of us just being a collection of guys who do a lot of tricks, I think we have to be real people who connect maybe through our magic. It doesn't necessarily have to be, you don't have to be a magician to connect, but as long as you are, what crazy power do you have to be able to kind of like meet people and have them enjoy what you do, um, when you're able to kind of like bring about like miracles to life, you know. uh, I think that it's actually it's really nice to be able to be yourself and to do magic along the road, along the way, you know. As a matter of fact, I think that really is the way magic should be performed, as instead of doing trick after trick after trick, I think that there has to be story in that the magic is intertwined absolutely within it.
Well, it's interesting to hear you say that, and the reason it's interesting that you say it today, because as some of us will know, it's birthday of dear Eugene Berger. May his memory be for a blessing.
Yeah.
Seriously, and that is something that he always taught us. I'm blessed to personally have some wonderful people as mentors. And he was a dear friend and a mentor. And some of you here know the story. If it wasn't for him, there wouldn't be an Anthony Darkstone as such. But that's a story for telling another time. Um, he often, and to paraphrase, spoke about the difference between tricksters and magicians. And I'll give everybody a moment to think about that. What I think he was really saying, well, in fact, I know that's what he was saying, was, as you've said, and I quote, trick after trick after trick after trick, and gee, look at this and look what I can do, and boom. And then there's the magic. We as
Well,
performers create the magic, and the props are secondary.
and the other thing is that I think that you need to take the you out of your show. You know, anything that smacks of ego, ta-da moments, or look at me, I think you just absolutely have lost your whole audience.
I believe you're absolutely right, and I dare say there'd be many mutual friends of ours who would nod their heads in agreement. We will be covering some of that also with Scott shortly. But if we look at some of the grand masters, and we're fortunate in a way with new technology to be able to see them, even if we didn't see them live, where they had the word I think I would look for is presence when they were performing. So, would you care to give us a little bit more thought on that?
I I absolutely agree. I mean, you know, the whole concept of being an entertainer is that you need to entertain, and that, you know, who cares at the end of the day how, you know, six silver dollars went through the table, or how you found four aces and they flipped over, unless people are really interested in you, you know. And I think one of my buddies, who I think is a consummate magician, but even more so an incredible entertainer, is Doc Eason, because Doc's not about the trick. He's about the connect. And that's what I think that it's all about.
Well, you brought up a very interesting name. I think I've shaken his hand somewhere down the line in the last few decades. But I have a collection of some of his, for want of a better word, quotes, his quips, his funny lines, which are just amazing. And I think this is what takes him several levels above what we might call the average performer. And you used an interesting word, entertainer. Now, I dare say there will be a lot of debate about this, and fair enough. All I will say is that the current dean of the Society of American Magicians, I had the privilege of being his house guest some years ago and learned a lot of stuff, etc., from him. He showed me his passport, and on his passport, where it says profession, it has one word, entertainer. That's it. Now, perhaps that might give all of us here today something to think about. I made reference to dear Eugene earlier on as it was his birthday. Now, how magical is it taking a piece of string, breaking it, and then putting it back together? It's really a nothing thing when you think about it. But when you watch Eugene, the genius of not breaking it, but having a tiny candle where the candle is used, and the scripting from the Bhagavad Gita, the whole story. I mean, even people who don't know what the hell the Sanskrit sacred texts are, they're still drawn in to that wonderful experience where, as John Rockefeller often says, and I remember conversing with him about this in New Orleans, magic is about like wooing somebody, like being a lover. And you've got to make them, i.e., the audience, in some ways feel what you feel. Now, you talked a lot, well, I say talked, written a lot about that in both your books. I mean, there's an entire chapter in the last book which refers to that.
Well, I really believe that magic has a lot in common with music, and that I see really great magic similar to songs. You need to have both. You need to have both the melody, the rhythm, etc., but you also need to have the lyrics. So if I could analogize, if you will, the two, without one, the other suffers. So you need to have techniques and presentation, but you also need to have story. And without the two together, something's missing. And that's what I write about or have written about in my first book, Bringing Magic to Life. And now much of this is about, much of that theme is within here. So I believe it. I bought into it. I've drank the Kool-Aid.
Well, I think it would be fair to say that neither book actually contain any effects.
Well, actually, the first book has my presentations for a number of close-up tricks, but I never really kind of like go into how it was done, et cetera. It's more how I present it. And I think that is really something that needs a lot more study as far as people who are getting their magic on YouTube or the internet, et cetera, is that there really needs to be some thought given to the words that you use, you know, because I think words matter.
Yes, yes. And sometimes even the lack of them. Some of the most brilliant magic that most of us have seen is the legendary Marcel Marceau. I mean, he never spoke. Everything was to do with kinesics. Now, kinesics, in a way, for me, is presentation and scripting.
Right, because you don't need to have a written script to have a presentation, but you have to have a presentation.
Yeah. exactly. I'll shortly go over to Scott, and I'm sure he will also, join us on this and other matters. But one of the things that I learned, I mean, a lot of people in this room know how old I am. If I make it till next month, I'll be 77. So which is kind of cool for me. But at 75, having done magic for a few decades in various places on the planet, I learned something. And what I learned, and there's a good reason I'm sharing this, because I would like your take on it, Jay, and later on Scott's as well. I had Howard Hamburg on the Darkstone Dossiers, and obviously we were chatting like you and I are now. And during that conversation, he explained something that he had learned. I forget who he learned it from. I just I'll remember it at 4 a.m. or something, but it doesn't matter. He spoke about the sponge balls. How many do you have in your hand? 2. No, it's 3. And okay, that's fine. And you get the golf clap and feel, oh, wow, whatever. Now, the point I'm making that Howard taught me and everybody who attended that episode, you can see it on YouTube. Somebody's put it all up on YouTube. He learned one word that made an entire difference. How many should you have in your hand?
Interesting.
That gives a warmth to the volunteer, that brings the volunteer in and demolishes, doesn't just bring down, demolishes the fourth wall, and all the audience get to love you as well. One word. So script and timing, as you said, is important.
You mentioned that fourth wall, and I really believe that that's a really important piece of entertainment, magic, wherever you go, that needs to be really studied, and if you could, broken down as well as you can, because once you have that wall, that barrier between you and your audience, whoever watches you, there's something that is kind of like missing. Open it up and just let them kind of like see you, and you just have to be a magician who, number one, is a person, and I just happen to have a set of skills that you may not have, but let me share them with you because maybe we could have fun along the way.
That's a wonderful kind of response to the fourth wall. Now, I'm going to shoot over to Scott and bring him in because he has had quite a lot of experience in drama techniques and many other things, which we will wax equally lyrical on. So, hello, Scott. Nice to have you here, sir.
Hey, Anthony. Wonderful information, Jay.
Yeah, boy, it was.
By the way, I used to watch, I was mentored, among others, by Al Goshman. You want to see somebody work, and he may have been who Howard was mentioning.
Very likely. Very likely. It's on the Darkstone Dossiers on YouTube somewhere, but I honestly forget the name. Now, we pulled up a little bit of description about both you gentlemen, and your description, well, it kind of listed a few things, some of which we have in common, like the Magiculum, the AMI, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But since conversing with you, I was totally joyous, prepping for this, because I thought to myself, ye gods, there are the gods of magic, because there does exist another person, a kindred spirit, who is a divination artist, a futurist, a psychic entertainer, a speaker, and a coach, a world-class raconteur, a philosopher, a lawyer, a screenwriter, a director, and most of all, a kindred spirit in all esoteric matters. So would you like to talk about this gentleman that I've just referred to? And how did all that come about?
I'd like to meet him someday. That would be very interesting. Yeah, I'm a creator. It's pure and simple is the way I look at what I do. I've been very blessed to have had some phenomenal mentors in legerdemain magic, from folks that I'm sure many of you have heard of, Di Vernon, Charlie Miller, Jules Lanier, Paul Green, Joe Berg. My God, I lived at Joe Berg's shop. Joe introduced me to Lou Derman, Francis Carlisle. I could go. I mean, I couldn't even tell you all the people I've had the opportunity of actually sitting down and working with. One of my favorite stories, by the way, when it comes to technique, happened to be sitting at the castle. By the way, Bill Larson was letting me into the castle before I was 21. It's a dirty little secret.
Let me
Bill had
just
given-
jump in. Let me just jump in and qualify that. I mean, I know that, and a couple of other folks know it, but for those who don't, you were 13 at the time, if I recall. Is that right?
Actually, no, I got into magic. I got into legerdemain magic, performance magic at 13. I met Bill when I believe I was 17 years old.
Okay. Yep. No, but you were still kind of like snuck in under the radar, so to speak. Please,
Absolutely.
please continue. Please continue.
I was a baby, and all I knew is I was hungry for this thing called entertainment. Having seen somebody at 13 do magic, and I didn't care about the trick. I'm fairly good at pattern recognition. I'm fairly good at deconstructing things instantly when I see things. What I couldn't do, however, was the audience reaction, and that's what got me into entertainment. And one thing led to another. I've told Anthony off air, I originally wanted to be Houdini. I then moved into close-up magic, and then from there, having met Jules and Max, etc., got into mentalism in conjunction with close-up magic. And all of these people saw me, as I've been told after the fact, because many of them who are still alive have said, they saw me as this hungry, respectful young kid who wanted to actually learn their presentation and entertainment skills in addition to the technical aspects of it. And because I was so hungry, I mean, I didn't call Di Vernon professor. I called him Mr. Vernon. Right. I'm 17 years old. That's what I was brought up with. And until they told me, look, you can call me Jules or you can call me Bruce. Bruce Serban was another one of my mentors. And it was a sharing of like-minded approaches. Some people on other shows have heard me talk about Max Maven. Max and I, yes, we talked about tricks or effects, but most of the time we sat around and talked about the inspiration behind things and the development. And it fed my hunger as an entertainer, tying in with what Jay was talking about. I went to the American Film Institute and studied directing and screenwriting, and then UCLA entertainment studies, where my specialty was, again, directing and screenwriting. So I come at everything I do, whether it's divination or it's magic, or it's even being on your show from a director standpoint and feeding the audience as part of their own hero's journey.
Well, it's interesting. You quoted yet another one of our favorite authors, Campbell, Hero's Journey.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of quotes, let me bring up two that I would not have known about had it not been for you. And I'm rather fond of them, and I'm bringing them up for good reason, which I will ask you about in a moment. We are surrounded by forces that technology cannot measure. Charles Darwin. And the other one. Magic comes from what is within. It is that part of you that can't weave a spell if you don't believe in it. And that was from Jim Butcher. Now, you've written several books, and you can reel them all off if you wish.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
exactly. They just Google your name on Amazon or whatever. Go to
Yeah,
Amazon.
there's like eight or nine books out there now. So
Out there on various topics. You were kind enough to share the prophecies with me, and for want of a better word, I can't think of another one. You know, I'm a wordsmith, but words fail me. I only have one word: riveted.
oh, thank you.
You're welcome. But it's absolutely true. It was riveting for a number of reasons. Now, I use these two quotes because we're going to talk about the futurist in you. um, and brief synopsis of prophecies, if you will.
Oh, it's very simple. Imagine Nostradamus putting down his quill and using a laptop instead.
Oh,
I have literally built on, and I think a number of people will understand what I'm about to say. As a mentalist, we all learn, Bob Cassidy and I used to have these conversations about what is your superpower? What is it that you do, right? So it's Scott plus the audience leaves the audience with what, as far as scripting and staging. And I have always, I had a tarot deck when I was 5 years old. That's one of the first things I remember getting. My family is from other places from Romania. I've got pictures of my great grandmother in the full Romanian gypsy garb, and my grandmother, by the way. I think many people will know the name Howard Hughes.
mhm.
My grandfather was friends with him, and I have a crystal ball that he and one of his wives gave to my grandfather and grandmother as a thank you for the fortune telling my grandmother was doing. So it comes naturally that I've grown up with magic. Forget legerdemain, with magic. I grew up with that from the age of 5 years old. Uh, that then moved into how do I combine the love of divination with the love of magic as we all know it. And one thing uh, led to another, and I was introduced to the work of David Hoy. I think many
Mm.
people know him. And that's when I first learned of hurling the headlines and never made the connection between that and Nostradamus. And, growing up at my age, the sleeping prophet Edgar Cayce was a big deal.
Mhm.
And who the hell hasn't gone into a Chinese restaurant and not opened a fortune cookie? So I've often likened what I do. I was joking with Jay. I'm a walking placebo. I'm also a human fortune cookie. And and so I took those concepts and thinking big, thinking, okay, taking the Houdini approach, what as a mentalist is the best I can hope for? Everybody knows Nostradamus. Nostradamus has been on the bestseller list for hundreds of years. I mean, he's to this day best-selling, and people find his enigmatic, cryptic verses just riveting enough, Anthony, that they can't stop talking about it. And I said, nobody else has done this for hundreds of years. And I took on that challenge. So what's happening with the prophecies is this is the first section. There will actually, and I've modeled this straight after Nostradamus, there will be 1,000 prophecies broken up into 3 books, one released every year. So this is the first one that just came out. And then there'll be another one next June. I'm following his publication schedule, by the way. And then the remaining after that. The interesting thing that some people have, and I don't make a big deal about it because this is what it is. I'm gonna take the approach of Nostradamus. Nostradamus was never interviewed on Zoom or YouTube. He didn't talk about this stuff. He just released it and let everybody else talk about it. So that's been my approach to this, and I've been very blessed to have Richard Webster as a dear friend, Richard has supported my work from years ago, and in fact, was the first person to test drive my Oracle deck, the Deck of Shadows, when I had made up a bunch of them, laminated them at home, sent them to him in New Zealand, and he and his granddaughter would play around with them, and we would talk about it. Well, when I told Richard about this, he took on the challenge of looking at some advanced copies and working with me on it. And even he said, this is the hardest forward I've ever had to write to a book, because I'm not even sure what the hell to say about it. And he didn't say hell. So, he has said some very nice things, and that's how the book came around. The interesting thing for me will be to see, and I know a few mentalists are actually doing this right now. When you get to the hurling the headlines concept, and again, I'm going to presume people know what it is. If you don't, go look it up. But at the end of the show, it's going to be interesting because some mentalists are taking passages out of this, and this is their hurling the headlines script.
Yeah. Here's one of them. Hold my hand up. Yeah, when I read it, I can remember thinking to myself, "Whoa, some good stuff for scripting here. Yeah, I could plagiarize the hell out of this. Not that I plagiarize anything, but this time
La
I
la 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 la.
Now you brought up a Richard, but I want you to please share with everybody the story that you told with another Richard Turner. I'd love
Oh my
everybody.
goodness.
I'd love you to share that, please.
So one of the things that I always learned in my mentorship with all these phenomenal people is you have skill, but you don't show it off. I'm not one of those finger flingers, right? If I'm doing a second deal or a bottom deal or a false cut, I'm not challenging the audience. They should never know I'm doing any of this work. And I have always been enamored with two things: close-up magic and con men. And if you know who Richard Turner is, Richard Turner has some sight impairment, a lot of sight impairment. It's gradually getting worse. But he puts himself off not only as a technician, thereby challenging the audience. He tells people what he does. He's also kind of that gambler, riverboat swagger, I'm going to take you. And so as a result of that, I studied very carefully what Richard did. I'm out here in Los Angeles, and so I have the benefit of getting to be around people at the Magic Castle. And Richard, I had been at lectures that he had given, and we had met tangentially through other people. But he was out at the castle performing in the close-up room, and I got the opportunity to actually just talk to him between shows. And I was explaining to him two things. One, my second deal, and number two, my one-handed Pharaoh shuffle that he's a big fan of. And for my second deal, he said, would you remember, he's got some sight impairment. He said, would you put your hand out and hold the deck? And so I did. And then he cupped his hand under mine. And then as I was going through, it's kind of hard at this angle, as I was going through doing the second deal, he put his other hand on top of mine. And by feel alone, he was able to correct some of the technical things that made what I was doing less than excellent. Same thing, by the way, with the one-handed Pharaoh, although I still have not mastered the strip out one-handed. I can get it in there one-handed. I just can't strip it out like he does. But this is the kind of thing that in today's world we sometimes miss because of this electronic digital age. When's the last time the finger flinger sat down with someone like a Max Maven or a Richard Turner or a Di Vernon or a Charlie Miller? You name all these people. Bruce Servan taught me his 3-turn pass, which is the most amazing pass I believe exists. Buried in one of his books, I think it's, I'm looking at my library right now. It's just, I think, Servan, Ultra Servan. You're not going to get this out of a book. until Bruce actually stands there and corrects the way you're holding your hands and turns it. Now, the funny thing is, I've seen Max Maven do the free turn pass, and it is completely invisible. And so, right, this is the kind of stuff that as a visual and auditory learner, you have to get in there and see that stuff.
Absolutely. You and I, and indeed Jay, and many of us here today, share in this mentoring process, something akin to, as we were saying earlier on, if you've done any martial arts, your sensei or sifu initially sort of teaches you how to fall, not how to break a brick or throw a 1-inch punch. It's in my workshops, I always talk about, Mr. Miyagi, paint on, paint off, wax on, wax off. Till you develop that, and I think a lot of people today, not everybody, thank goodness, but a lot of the up and comers and some of the older guys too, yeah, I know that, whatever. No, keep your mind open. As I referred to earlier on, Howard Hamburg taught me and other people one word: keep your mind open. That one word made a whole world of difference to how this effect is performed. Now I'm going to drift away from magic just briefly, because as you know, I make a mean guacamole, and I'm a lover of guacamole. But you've recently been in some wars, I gather, with your avocado.
The beasts in the backyard.
Yeah, exactly.
So I am a recovering attorney, and in my recovery, I have decided to become a gentleman farmer, and my wife and I have a grove in the backyard, a citrus grove. Has got a fair number of different things. We have, I believe, 3 trees short of a commercial grove. So that should tell you how much we have back there. And one of the trees we have is an avocado tree. And yeah, this year the beasts have decided to go after the avocado. Here in California, we've had an inordinate amount of rain, and it has helped the harvests all the way along. And we have more avocados than we usually have. And so these little buggers, I believe they're squirrels, but I could be wrong. These little buggers are getting into the tree, taking the avocado. And just recently, they've decided to flaunt it by using one of the camp stools around they've taken one of the camp stools around the back door fire pit and have set up a picnic table out there, and have put the avocado on top of it. And so now, by the way, we're moving into peach season and plum season, and they sit up in the trees and scream at you if you try to get near their trees.
Yeah, I could just visualize that. Yes, putting up. I'm sorry, it did crack me up. Putting up this little bench next to the table. Oh goodness. Well, let's bring us back to a different kind of magic, shall we? You spoke earlier on about your tarot deck and so on, and I wish we had 400 hours to chat more about it. But you've got a couple of things coming up in the very near future, I believe, at the castle, which is a workshop, if I'm not mistaken, is it to do with tarot?
Actually, there's a separate kind of workshop stuff that I do privately, but what's coming up to the castle, you talk about being open. Some of the people at the Magic Castle, and I'm going to mention Ben Roman and Paul Green by name, they have been so open to the way I mix divination and magic performance stuff that for the last 15 years they've allowed me to come in, and I actually teach classes at the castle called Divination for Magicians. And I think and I think a lot of our listeners might be surprised at how many magicians are actually closet psychics. They've all got a tarot deck, they've all had something weird happen during a show, and so we talk about how to integrate mentalism, for lack of a better way to put it, mentalism, storytelling, and true divination skills, and get rid of all of the, excuse my language, the crappy cold reading. Stop with the cold reading already, because there's no reason to do that. If you know these skills. As a matter of fact, Max Maven and I used to have wonderful conversations about this. And I mentioned this to you, Anthony, before, and you said mention it on the show. I don't think
Right.
most people realize Max wrote a fortune-telling book back
That's
in
right.
1992. And he, thankfully he autographed it for me, and we were having, because I have my fortune-telling books. And so we would talk about that aspect and what it means when, for example, any of you guys who are card guys, if we go to a restaurant and you want to show off to the wait staff, because you know it's going to happen, you're going to bring out a deck of cards. You're going to ask the waiter or waitress, would you like to see something cool? And then you'll do your version of pick a card, or, the invisible deck, whatever it is that you do. And then it comes around to me, and I happen to notice that the waitress has a tattoo behind her ear. And then I start a reading riffing off of that. And she, after I'm done and the card tricks are done, and then she brings other friends from wait staff over to the table, guess what they're going to want? They're
Right.
not going to want the card trick. They want, can you read my palm? Here's my birthday. You go into all of that. So with that in mind, and understanding the needs of an audience, particularly in a society full of stress, right? We all know that in times of chaos and stress, the interest in psychic phenomena, fortune telling, ESP skyrockets. Well,
Correct.
that's where we are right now. With that, and again, leveraging off my fortune telling for magicians or divination for magicians stuff that I've done for about 15 years, teaching at the Magic Castle or the Academy of Magical Arts. I proposed last year that for Halloween, they let me come in and I would be the Oracle. Again, using the Oracle of Delphi as the model. And the first response was, huh? Wait, this is
Hmm.
the Magic Castle. What are you talking about? I said, no, I want to be the Oracle of Delphi at the Magic Castle, and we're just going to call it the Oracle at the Magic Castle. And they after I explained to them that it was my version of Q&A without the, as Max put it, it's Q&A without the Q.
Right. Now,
It's a stand-up gallery reading. So we did it last year, and now they've got me coming back for 36 shows this Halloween.
that's very, very cool. I've noted in my notes here that you have a workshop coming up on June 15.
Yeah, unfortunately, I had to cancel that because of
Okay.
a personal challenge. I will redo that one.
Okay.
Thank you for mentioning it. That workshop actually was
Mm.
teaching people my version of the French cross for those
Uh-huh.
that work with tarot cards.
Now, if people want to know more about it, and when you get the postponed date, so to speak, they can find all that on your social media, your Facebook page, or wherever.
I'm on every social media, and they can certainly find me. If it's magic, you can go to Scott Grossberg Magic, or
Mhm.
if it's everything, my other events, it's thinkingmagically.com.
Okay, that's your site. Yeah, that's good. So basically, oh man, I have so many things that I want to cover, basically and otherwise. But I can't kind of finish our session without referring to the cards of
Oh,
destiny.
the Destiny cards.
Yes, well,
This is.
let me do my intro, Scott.
Oh,
Let me
sorry.
do my intro. No, it's okay. The cards of destiny. Yes, I'm a ham. So what? I'm a magician.
Yeah. So what these are my add-ons to a tarot or oracle deck, and I created them.
Hold them up a little bit higher if you could, please.
Well,
That's
I'll give you an example. I mean, I'll let people see one of them.
okay. There you go.
And they are broken down using the word destiny as an acronym.
Hmm.
Very much, by the way, for those of you that may remember the old matches acronym for doing readings. So it's destiny, exploration, security, training, improvement, new stuff, and yearning. And these 7 cards cover any question anybody could ever ask. That 7 cards will cover
Wow.
anything. And then there's a explanation on the back of new ways to do readings that I like to do. So essentially, it's a pocket crib sheet
Mm-hmm.
that the audience uses without even knowing what it is. The audience thinks they're just going through and saying, okay, think of a question. Well, let's see. I want to know about love. And as soon as they pull that card out, everything I need is on it without having to memorize new layouts, old layouts, meanings. And then there's the very special welcome to the show card, which looks
Ah.
like a circus,
Mm.
and in fact is an entire reading layout based on the drama triangle. I don't know if many of you know that.
Mm-hmm.
All of our, as a coach, I can tell you that everybody is stuck in the drama triangle. And
Mm.
so my job is to take the drama triangle they're in, looks like a circus, right? Not my circus, not my monkeys, and help them free that. And it's way too, it's an antidote, for lack of a better way, of
Well, the designs,
taking the
the
drama.
designs, the designs are beautiful. But I tell you
Thank you.
what you're welcome. What really triggered it for me is a crib sheet, literally in plain sight.
Yeah,
I love that concept. I mean, man, how cool is that? Yeah.
well, here's the thing. The two things drove these for me. One, I'm always exploring new stuff. I can't even begin to tell you how many different tarot readings I've designed or studied or adapted or adopted. They're endless. And anytime somebody wants something, there's always me searching, God, is there a better way to do a reading that is meaningful, profound, and positive, without being woo-woo? I mean, I interpret cards. That's what, right? Um, Many of you have heard of the author Neil Gaiman. Neil gave me permission to put a quote in the Masks of Tarot, my first tarot book that came out. This is what happens when you make up stuff for a living. And I've always been very aware of that. And so if we're going to go through and do a reading, there are promises that we make to the audience,
Mm-hmm.
and these cards further that promise for me. I do not have a release date on these yet, nor a training class. I literally, Anthony, did some tweaking of it even for today, because I knew we were going to talk about these. But
Right.
bottom line is they are a way to give a reading and never have to remember anything.
Well, that's two things I'm going to come over to your place and steal. One is avocados, and secondly, is these cards of
There you go.
yeah. Well, Scott, we're getting to that time now where I think we ought to leave some time for folks who may want to chat directly with you and Jay. I just want to thank you and Jay for sharing a minuscule amount of what both you gentlemen are all about. I'd love to, at some stage, via Annie, just kind of do a whole workshop type thing, but we'll talk about that in due course, because I know you're a man who has a 27-hour clock. All of those hours are filled. So you're probably the busiest guy I've ever met in my life. I thought I was till I met you. But it's been joyous. It really has. And as I said it before, and I say it with reverence, personally and professionally, it's such a joy for me to share time with you. It's such an erudite mind. If there's one word that I would like to describe you as, is erudite. In so many, as you're welcome. Yes, magic technician, all these other things, writer, author, you name it. But having someone with this vast cornucopia, if you like, of things that you draw from, and having sort of got into legerdemain, stroke magic, stroke mentalism, stroke whatever, you draw from all these sources to create your presentation and your scripting. And as you rightly said, and as Jay has also referred to, and as I did, that fourth wall ceases to exist.
No.
And that is really what I believe, and I think you do as well, as Jay and some of us in this room, is what we're supposed to do as magical entertainers.
Yeah.
So,
By the way, Jay, I want to say one thing to you. One thing I don't have is your sense of humor. I wish I had that component. So I applaud you.
Oh, nonsense. You have a wonderful sense of humor. I've seen some of you. I can't agree with that. Oh, no, you have
All right. Well, all right. I got a little sense of
Well,
humor.
no, you got a great sense of humor. It's very subtle. Maybe that's why some folks miss it, but I love the subtlety. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think what we can do now, if we may, is bring all three of us up on the screen. If you would, Zoom Master. And I think if you look at the bottom of your screen, it says reactions. One of them is raising your hand. I don't mean this. I mean actually use the emoji to do that if you want to say something or whatever. So if you would do that, then we can, it's easier to spot. So, ladies and gentlemen, the floor is yours. You may question, ask, do whatever you will with my guest. Yeah, I'm sorry. Tom Gentile, past national president of the Society of American Magicians. Welcome, Tom.
I am curious, how long did it take you both to kind of put all the thoughts together? I know Jay has, like he said, 20 years ago, and Scott, you said this is your first The Prophecy, but to plan it out like that, how many hours a week do you put into putting thoughts down, or does it just come to you, or you have it sitting on a desk and say, this is the time I'll release it?
Well, for me, I'm not a good sleeper. So 2 to 4 in the morning is kind of like is a good time for me to kind of like say, well, maybe I should put that down on the computer. I might forget it in the morning.
Scott?
I enjoy having written, Tom. And I will tell you, almost everything I do is a download. Not completely, but I have always been very good at sleep study. So I actually give myself instructions before I go to bed, wake up, and it's all there, and I just write.
Okay, thank you.
That's
I do.
a good method.
Thank you. It was a great afternoon, Anthony. Great program as always. Jay.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you,
Thanks.
Tom. Yeah,
Take care.
we've had some fun on the Darkstone Dossiers over the years. Yeah,
Class.
including when you were on, sir. Yes. We see a hand raised. It is Mr. Bowman, indeed, isn't it?
Yeah, hi.
Hi,
Hey,
not a
Jay,
partner.
Doctor, I've got this
Another-
pain here in my side.
No problem.
For those who don't know, another past national president from the Society of American Magicians. Yes, please. Yeah,
A few years
Look-
ago, yeah.
yeah. A few years ago. That's all right.
I just wanted to publicly thank Jay. He brought me along in this process of reading excerpts and going through the book and talking about different things. And yeah, I can verify that he does his best work at 2 a.m. because I get emails from him like I'm not awake, and then he'd forget that time-wise that I'm 2 hours off of him. So I'm just wondering what Elise was probably punching him, saying, "Get off the computer" or something.
Really.
But thanks, Jay, for bringing me, because I'm doing two things simultaneously as well. Working on a novel, which Jay has read a few times, and in the final throes of trying to get that published. And I'm updating my Magic for Children book. And so, I can't thank him enough for that.
Thank you, Dick. I think we had our Grand Master of Force, dear pal, the wonderful magician and MIMC with the gold star at the circle. And he's got the old circle in the background, and that's dear John O'Riordan.
First of all, Anthony, thank you for allowing me to join this evening. And
pleasure, absolute pleasure. Thank you.
You're very inspiring when you talk. And the question I would like to ask is, Vernon, certain people have been mentioned tonight. Who will inspire the young magicians of the future?
That really is a good question. I don't know. It's almost sad because it's so hard for me to come up with a name. I mean, we have We have our David Copperfields and our David Blaines, but I'm not sure that they give the same sort of juice to the next generation as the ones that we had when we were growing up.
Yeah, I remember, right, Doug Henning, right? Doug made you believe
Yeah.
Yeah.
not only in magic, but by his own personal account that levitation was possible. Copperfield, when he first came out, you believed someone could fly. I remember Siegfried and Roy back when they had their show in Vegas, and it was the spectacle of it all. And
Yeah.
I got to tell you, John, that I believe that the next inspirations for our future magicians aren't going to come from the magicians we have today. I think it's going to come from science fiction, fantasy, and the motivational people that are out there. I think we're moving into a different phase of magic that helps transform people, not just entertain them.
Well, if I could jump in there, John, that's a very good question. And the reason I want to jump in is because top of my list would be you. Really. I'm not just saying that because John's here. If you've seen his work and understand what he does and why he does it, yeah, John Reardon will definitely inspire people, as will Mike Vincent, as will Frank Zack, and people of that caliber. So as Jay was saying, it's very hard to kind of go, yeah, that one person. If you want to watch Mike Vincent and John O'Riordan on the 6th of July, same time, same place, we're having an AMI Gala show, and they very kindly said yes to me, and they're in the cast. And you'll be able to see some of their splendid magic. Two people, and I've said this publicly many times, and I'll say it again, that I love to watch because they make me feel like a layperson.
Yeah. I want to add one thing that now that you've said that, Anthony,
Mhm.
the times, and John, you'll appreciate this. I've told you about the Oracle at the Magic Castle. Through Zoom, I actually did the Oracle at the Magic Circle and have lectured for the Magic Circle as well. I've also appeared, I've done 3 seminars over in London, and it's a different type of magician in the UK. They are so open, and if I could live in the UK and do what I do, I would be a happy guy. Because here in the United States, and in particular, even at the Magic Castle, I'll be forthright, there's not that openness to hypnosis and psychic entertainers and tarot readers, notwithstanding the history that the castle, for example, has. And I don't see that. So in the UK, it may be completely different, where you've got Darren Brown we don't have a Darren Brown movement here in the United States. Copperfield never had that. Doug Henning never had that. Nobody had the stickiness that Darren Brown has. And I remember being over there, by the way, at the time when Darren came out, and the people, there were protests saying, no, that's not it. I mean, women were heartbroken. That's the kind of personality that I think will help with the future.
You may not remember what he does, every one of his tricks, but you remember him.
Absolutely. And David Nyman is a big influence on that, right? You can look at Darren and look at his shows when Andy wasn't part of it. And then when Andy comes back in, it's that whole teamwork collaboration, John, that I think over there are going to drive things.
Well, to be fair, to both gentlemen, and indeed yourself, Andy Nyman is very, 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 did I say very, steeped in theater. Both
Exactly.
both as a director and as an actor, and he also knows magic. So yes, he took the performer Darren Brown, and as you say, added to it, if you like.
Well, and I think you may have hit on something even bigger here to answer John's question.
Mm.
You know, I'm a big believer that any magician, no matter what their level of expertise is, at some point, go take an improv class,
Mm.
learn how to say yes and to everything that comes your way. The younger magicians, for the most part, it's all juggling. It's
Mm.
because they think intent, right? They've got the attention span of a gnat,
Mm.
and they've learned that on YouTube. They've learned it on TikTok. Everything's quick and flashy and whatever else. And when they hear storytelling, when they actually are presented with a shaman,
Mm.
their whole life changes. And John, I think that there's a bigger opportunity where you are than where I am.
Well, yet another, well, I'm not surprised, yet another wonderful sterling point from Scott, because most people just use the first part of the quote from Jean-Robert Houdin, which is the magician is an actor playing the part of a magician. Yes, there's a relevance to that, but if you need to read the whole thing. You need to read the whole thing. There's a whole lot more to it. He actually, for want of a better phrase, he actually states the magician is not a juggler. So it doesn't matter how many fancy cuts and things that you do, and yeah, great. So what?
I have
Could I even make it even more basic and suggest that uh, you have to come across as a human being
Mm,
first, you
mm.
know? And unfortunately, that's lost along the way.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
it seems so basic.
Yep,
Well,
you're
it's
so
the
right.
masks that we all wear, right, as different
Mm,
people. But I even simplify it the way you do, Jay. For those of you who do mentalism, but by show of hands, how many of you do mentalism or mental magic, right? I'll be the first to tell you, rule number one of Scott, nobody likes a fake psychic. Either live what you're doing, and I'm not going to get into the beliefs of what you are. I'm just saying, if you're going to put it out there, I'm a magician, right? Nobody wants a fake magician. Nobody wants a fake Dumbledore. They want to
yeah.
go to Hogwarts. And I actually, in my Magic Castle performances, I tell people, you know, I ask people first, how many of you believe in magic? Right? So by the way, of the people here, how many of you actually believe in magic?
Yeah.
Once they raise their hand, this is your audience now. Once you believe in magic, I can tell you, people who believe in magic dream of doing magic, not of watching it.
Mm.
And then I'm on for the ride with them. I'm not taking them on a ride. I'm on the ride to help them walk out realizing they have changed from the minute they walked into the door to the theater to the time that we end.
That's so valid. I mean, I can't emphasize it more. I think Paul's got his hand up. Paul Abbey from England. Yes, Paul. So anyway, ask your question. Go ahead.
Well, as I said, I think you've already answered it. Actually, I wanted to get your slant on both of you, from Scott and Jay here, about acting, because I actually feel a bit of a fraud when I come onto these things. I'm very grateful for Anthony inviting me on, but actually, I'm an actor by trade. I only got into magic because I went to drama school. I did magic as a hobby, but I never ever wanted to do it as a profession. I think you've actually answered it. How important do you both feel acting is in as a performer in magic?
I have an acting degree, so it's like, and
Oh,
and you know, my specialty, my focus was directing and screenwriting, and so I've been an actor, and that experience, nothing nothing has changed what I do, whether it's in a courtroom, whether it's in a Zoom call, is to, you know, a good actor. If you watch somebody on the screen, you know when you see a good actor. You may not be able to tell me what they've done technically, but they have captured your soul. You have connected with them, and suddenly you're watching the movie or reading a book, and you're now in the story. And that's the thing. And Jay, you'll appreciate this, right? I think a lot of doctors today are inadequate witch doctors. The good doctors today know what it is to sit by a campfire and say, "Hey, Paul, have you ever felt that connection with somebody instantly, heart to heart? Felt that red cord that connects us all universally?" Or to start a story with "once upon a time," right? And now everybody wants to lay their head down and take a nap with milk and cookies. We forget all that.
From my perspective, it's not necessarily that you have to be an actor. You have to be human. And people have to realize that, this is someone who's not faking it, who is actually real. And that when you see what he does, he may do some amazing things, but at the bottom, the basis is that this is a real person, and he's not trying to come across as anything else but. So I don't know, that's my go away message.
Well, you reminded me of a quote from the legendary, great, blessings for his memory, Kirk Douglas. I remember him, and it stayed with me forever. It was years and years ago. He was on a talk show, much like this on TV, and somebody asked him about something, and his reply was, and I'm going to get it absolutely right because it's printed there. It's not my job to convince myself I am Spartacus. My job is to convince you that I am Spartacus. Now, there's a statement that we can discuss for hours. There's so many interpretations to that. Yeah. Oh, John's jumped in. Yes, John.
Yes, it's just coming back to build on what Jay was saying there about being human. And I think it's important to know yourself, to know about yourself. And I think that's very important when you're talking and meeting people, and there's nothing fake about you, and I think that's very important. And you'll get that by
I
talking.
think you're right. I think you have to be comfortable in your own skin,
Yes.
and you have to be able to be vulnerable. And it's okay if someone says something negative about you, you could just kind of you could just either shrug it off or take it to heart, but you are who you are. That's all.
Well,
What is the saying, Jay? What people say about me is none of my business.
Yeah. But but just coming back to that, Jay, if you build up relationships, it's never negative anyway. It's what people feel, what people see, and it's up to you to take it on board. They may be right, they may be wrong, but I think if we reflect on that, we can learn a lot from what people actually say to us. Trusted friends,
The biggest thing, by the way, the biggest thing that I do, just real quickly, when I work with magicians in workshopping settings, from a performance and directing, tweaking standpoint, is literally I'm constantly asking them, who are you pretending not to be?
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a neuro-linguistic programming component to that bypasses that critical faculty, and you get that deer in the headlight look the minute I ask that.
Yeah.
And then it's a vision quest from there on out, where it's like, how do we get to the root source of you?
But also, Scott, on that again, is who am I when no one's looking?
Yep.
Yep.
And as dear Eugene, I did mention it's his birthday today, or the anniversary of, what do you want your magic to be?
Yeah.
Now, that's a like $64,000 question. That's loaded. God, I'm showing my age. $64,000 years ago. Yeah, but seriously, what do you want your magic to be? Mr. Walzer, would you like to comment? Or
I have no questions, but I'd like to know how I can get on this every week or more often. I'm really enjoying this.
Well, you're very, very kind. Thank you. I've been doing the Darkstone Dossiers for some time under the banner of the International Assembly for the Saudi American Magicians, and recently we've switched to Association Magiciens Internationaux. all I will say to you is you are very, very welcome to send me a quick message, or I will seek you out and send you the link on Facebook.
Okay.
It's a private group. It's called Association de Magiciens Internationaux, and the acronym for that is AMI, which is ami, friend in French. And we take it's a private virtual club, and this is the sort of thing that we do. And our motto, I'm not trying to plug it, I'm just trying to explain. Our motto we took from the great David Devant, who was the first president of the Magic Circle. It is all done by kindness. So you're very welcome to come and ask to join us. Usually there's posts on there which tells you when different events and things are happening. We have one coming up hopefully later this month, which is interestingly entitled Chilling with Darkstone, where we just get together. There's no real agenda or structure, and we just chat about whatever we want to do, more or less like you're all hanging out in a bar or restaurant or over a cup of coffee or whatever. And so I'll be posting about that in a few places. And on the 6th of July, you might want to make a note. We have our first year in existence of Ami, a gala show, of which I mentioned earlier on. Among the splendid cast, we have dear John O'Riordan and Mike Vincent, and several other wonderful names from different countries in the world. So, Mr. Walden, sir. Mr. Walden? No, Wald. Sorry, I can't see. Didn't have my glasses on there. Yeah, just go to Association de Magiciens Internationaux. It's on Facebook, or just send me a message and I'll give you the link. And you're very welcome to just come in and join us. My mission, if you like, both personally and professionally, is to share their thinking and the humanity and the decency that's in magic, which is one of the reasons why I've asked these two gentlemen to come on. And I think we're all agreed that they don't get much more decent and human than both Scott and Jay. John, please.
I just want to say
Thanks.
thank you, Anthony, for
Very welcome.
all the work you've done for the past few years on making it possible for me to make friends across the world, you know, and to see Scott and Jay and other people on tonight, it's really valuable. It's something that I wouldn't have had years ago. You know, we'd be confined to our books and things, but I think it's just wonderful. And you know, thanks ever so much. I really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I am. You're so welcome. You really, really are. And thank you for all you do for magic and all your friendship and wonderful, kind help that you've given to Ami and the world of magic in general, basically.
That's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we'll get to our Zoom master. Call it a wrap, I guess.
Thank you for having me, Anthony. We will
Not
chat
at all. Thank
another
you.
time.
Thank you. Thank you both, gentlemen.
Thank you,
I
Scott.
believe I've
Thank
done
you,
it before, but I'll do it again. Yeah.
All right.
Oh, our Zoom master says, thank you. This was very thought-provoking and enjoyable. I really enjoyed it. He's a pretty cool magician himself. He does some cool stuff with coins. Wow. Yeah, he's amazing, Austin. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you, gentlemen, again. Take it easy, everybody.
Right.